Listen to a lecture in a music class.
Today, we'll talk a little about the early history of opera. The earliest opera that we have a record of is Jacopo Peri's Eurydice, written in 1600 for the court. The libretto, or the text of the opera, was written by Ottavio Rinuccini, and the story was based on the ancient tale of Orpheus, who tried to rescue his dead lover Eurydice from Hades, the underworld as told in Ovid's Metamorphoses. This opera involved very light accompaniment, which means that there were very few instruments used. As well, the opera used something called a recitative. This is a musical technique where words are sung in a manner that imitates everyday speech. You'll notice recitative as being the parts between arias. Recitative is useful for helping to carry the story forward. Opera continued to develop, and a significant step was taken by Claudio Monteverdi in 1607, when he wrote his masterpiece, Orfeo. Compared to earlier operas, Orfeo featured a bigger overall sound as the orchestra was expanded. Like Peri, Monteverdi composed for the royal court. In 1637, the first public opera house opened in Venice, so operas became open to the public. Tickets were sold, and everyday people could watch an opera. These early public operas often involved humor mixed with tragedy. However, many people criticized this mix as being distasteful. From the 1720s to around 1770s, opera seria was popular. It had a story based on serious subjects from myth or history. One important innovation of opera seria was its emphasis on great singing. Because opera seria involved long arias, it required talented singers. Operas of this type tended to be very spectacular, both vocally and visually. The most famous composers of opera seria include Alessandro Scarlatti, Vivaldi, and Porpora.
1. What is the main topic of the lecture? 2. Who was the audience for the very first operas? 3. What is significant about Jacopo Peri's Eurydice? 4. Indicate whether each of the following is true about opera seria. Tick in the correct box. Listen to a lecture in a physics class. Today, we're going to talk about Newton's first law of motion. I'll give you a basic definition. Newton's first law states, an object at rest tends to stay at rest, and an object in motion tends to stay in motion with the same speed and in the same direction unless acted upon by an unbalanced force. Then what exactly do we mean by an unbalanced force? I'll show the difference between a balanced and an unbalanced force. Do you see this book is sitting here on the table? It's not moving, right? This is an example of a balanced force. There are two forces at work here that are perfectly balanced. First of all, there is the force of gravity that is pulling this book down. To prevent it from falling down, there is also the force of the table pushing the book up. But if either force was lesser or greater, it would be unbalanced. It would either rise or fall. This is what happens when you put a book on an inclined plane, such as a ramp. Instead of staying still, the book slides down the ramp. This is an example of an unbalanced force. Now, attention please. I want you to take a look at this model set. It's a train set with a beaker of water attached on its top. Let's watch. I'll start the train. Do you notice the water spills out of the beaker? How does this happen? This is because an object at rest tends to stay at rest. In other words, the water was still at first, and once the train started moving, the water wanted to remain where it was. So it shakes and spills out. Now take a look at the water when I stop the running train. See, it spills over too. This is because an object in motion tends to stay in motion. The water was moving in a line with the train and wanted to continue moving even though the train stopped. Did you get it? I'll give you a practical example of Newton's first law of motion. Let's consider seat belts. Remember, Newton's law states that an object in motion tends to stay in motion. Imagine that you are driving in your car at 100 kilometers per hour. If your car crashes into a brick wall and if you're not wearing your seatbelt, what will happen? Right, your body will continue to keep moving and you'll go head first through the windshield of your car. That's why you should buckle up your seatbelt every time you enter a car. Now get ready to answer the questions. You may use your notes to help you answer. 1. What is the teacher mainly talking about? 2. According to the lecture, which of the following is not true? 3. What does the teacher not use to explain Newton's first law of motion? 4. Why does the teacher do an experiment with a train model set? 5. How does the teacher describe a balanced and an unbalanced force?